record, I would like to recognize that all of our school board members are present, in addition to Tanya Baker, board clerk, and Mrs. Robinson, division superintendent. At this time, I invite you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Board members, we have the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda.
Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussions? All those in favor, please say yes.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. On our agenda is the budget presentation for the public hearing. Mrs. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and board members, welcome. We are sorry that we are having some technical difficulties with our audio, but we will get through with our public hearing. I'd like to invite Ron Vickers and, of course, Ms. Laura Taylor to come and present our proposed budget. Mr. Vickers, we have had several conversations with Mr. Vickers, Ms. Taylor, our staff, as we go through the budget, but this is, again, we are not voting on this budget tonight. We will have it on the agenda for next week for your final approval. So, Mr. Vickers, welcome, and thank you for yelling louder, sir, as we go along here.
Laura and I were talking just earlier, and we've never really been told to speak in our outside voice. Normally it's, please don't use your outside voice. So,
we understand, sir.
Good evening. Sir. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to come once again before you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. It's been a little while since we have last come before you. So we do have some updates. We have finalized what we consider the proposed budget for you to consider and for the public to actually give their opinion, recommendations, things that are basically very important to them. It kind of goes back to what we said in our first couple of meetings when we were allowing other stakeholders to have input into the budget process and to basically work with us to develop the goals for Dickinson County in FY22. Just to give a quick breakdown of what we have tried to do, which we have said in the last couple of meetings, is to facilitate the best educational program that we can for the county, to provide the best learning environment, and to provide the best teachers and staff for our students. What we've tried to do in this budget that's before you, there are several overreaching principles that you'll see in each of these categories. Overall, the state has provided a 5% compensation supplement for all employees, and what you see here, all full-time employees and other part-time wage employees will be offered a increase. The state does provide SOQ funding for those positions to receive those funds. Health insurance premiums are held stable throughout this fiscal year. Other benefit percentages such as VRS and other percentages that we consider benefits are also stable as they were last year, seeing this as the caboose bill to the biennium. None of those percentages have changed since last year. This does take in consideration minimum wage changes, and if you remember, the governor had signed minimum wage increases before the pandemic took place, and they were delayed because of that. So the very first jump to $9.50 per hour will happen in May of this year. There will also be an additional jump in January of 22 to $11 an hour. This does include some other federal grant and other monies that are we consider flow through. So basically you'll see the exact same number in revenue as you do in expenditures. If we do not receive the money in one, of course the expenditure won't be be spent either. So we will kind of get into a lot of the information that's before you. So we'd like to bring your attention to page 1 in your packet. Some of these numbers you have already seen. If I remember correctly, we presented the House budget as a part of the state funds. Since then, of course, we received the final document, the entitlement sheets for Dickinson County on the budget that has passed. Not a whole lot has changed in the figures that you've seen. The final budget was very close to what the House proposal was. I'll take you down some of the key items that you will see. Of course, the SOQ positions are very close. You'll see that sales tax is a decrease and basic aid is an increase. Of course, this is a function of whatever the formula is for all SOQ positions. It's a give and take formula. But basically, we're looking at total SOQ accounts of just over $13.9 million. In the incentive programs on page 1, we'd like to bring your attention to a couple of different line items that were in the entitlement sheet beforehand, but want to go ahead and mention the compensation supplement of just over $528,800 and no loss funding of just over $488,300. Total incentive funding of $2.1 million. And the bat phone is going off, so we'll wait just a second. Okay. I'd like to bring your attention to categorical programs. Of course, these are fairly level considering from one function or fiscal year to the other. So really very little changes, just under $22,800. Lottery funded programs starting to end on page 1. Most of those are fairly consistent with what you've seen last time. These are just functional items that are readily given between the basic aid and lottery. These are directly given by the state. The rest of the lottery funds are continued on page 2, and we see a total lottery funds of just over $1.7 million. Total state funding of just over $17,800,000. The next category on page 2 of your packet is federal funding, and there's a lot of different items that we had not put in the previous presentation. A lot of these being federal title funds. These are Title I, Title II, which is teacher training, Title IV, special ed, Title VI. A lot of these were actually included and are in this program or in this document or flow through. In other words, the revenue comes in and is spent back out on the other side. Basically, they are very consistent. As you see the far right column, they are very consistent. The total federal funds is just over $3.4 million. Of course, as we mentioned last time, we are looking at requesting for county operations $6.3 million. It is now in this document, and as we mentioned before, it is a part of the 140% of the required local effort that is listed on the entitlement sheet. There at the bottom of page 2, we're looking at other funds. I'd like to bring your attention specifically to the second line item that we have for CARES CRF funding. This is a part of what I would like to call CARES 2. So we are getting multiple buckets of federal funding in several different ways. This is the large amount that we have, only have a third represented here. So you will see this actually in the expenditure part as a flow-through item. That is just over $956,000. In talking with Ms. Robinson, this is to provide summer schools for children, after-school programs, tutorials, additional occupational, physical, and speech therapy for students who have not had those services while during the pandemic and in virtual classrooms. There are a lot of services that children are given while they're within our walls, and this is a way to basically fill that need and basically allow those children to either be brought to grade level or to provide the services that they have not received while the pandemic has been ongoing. The other figures we have basically round out the other funds at just a little bit over $1.7 million. On page 3, we have just the very last item in our revenue, and this is for textbook fund balance. And the way textbook fund balances are given is, of course, during the beginning of the year, textbooks and materials are bought for classes for all school year. So the school division basically holds the revenue they receive all year and then allows it to be purchased for the next beginning of the year. So you do have to appropriate the next fund balance. We're looking at total revenues of just over $29.6 million. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions concerning revenue this time, if anyone has any.
Any questions? Mr. Vickers?
Mr. Vickers, if I may, you mentioned summer school, and this year we are offering almost a 5-week, 4.5-week summer school where we will be running buses on regular routes, providing lunch, breakfast, everything that we can. We will be doing that face-to-face, and so it will be a full summer school program. We're not calling it summer school, we're calling it Summer Academy, where students can just come in and work with us in small groups. We plan to have no more than 10 students per class with additional aids, whatever we can provide to help our children that are the neediest, or the children that just need to come and be a part of a socialization. So we want to try to make summer school fun, but we also have very specific goals to get there with summer school.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring your attention to page 4 of your packet. We will begin looking through our expenditures. This is the beginning of the categorical expenditures that you'll see that are given to us by the state. Of course, the biggest being on page 4 is instruction. As we mentioned earlier, this is the actual rubber meets the road category. This pertains to anything going on in the classrooms that's affecting instruction for our children and our students. Majority of what you see on this page is what you've seen in previous presentations. This does include the 5% commission or a compensation increase, minimum wage considerations, so forth. I'd like to bring your attention to a couple of line items in the non-wage area, and this is where we have added the CARES and the Title I flow-through funds that would match the revenue portions that you saw in the revenue section. So these are completely flow-through. This gives an appropriation or allotment for Ms. Robinson and the county to enact these catch-up provisions for our students during the summer and in the following school year. Total instructional expenditures of just over $19.4 million. I'd like to bring your attention to page 5. We have a couple of different categories here, first being the administration, attendance, and health. Several increases here, but those that you have seen before, we're talking about the 5% compensation supplement, other increases for school nurses having to do with minimum wage requirements. Transportation also, looking at the exact same issues for the 5% increase. We're also looking at increases in fuel purchases, maintenance supplies, and of course we've just rounded out the inflationary bump for the purchase of 2 buses included in this budget. Total of transportation of just over $2.4 million. Bringing your attention to page 6 of your packet. Also looking at operation and maintenance, continuing to look at additional changes in salaries and wages, also looking at an additional bump in utilities and purchase services, and also materials and supplies for janitorial and our skilled maintenance staff. Total operation and maintenance of just over $3 million. School food service, being self-sufficient, it does exactly what you would think it would. It is having to do with our cooks and our management of the school food service program. All of these are expected. We have increased the food products and materials and supplies to compensate for inflation and other changes. Looking at school food at $1.8 million, just a little over $1.8 million. Bring your attention to page 7. And page 7, of course, is the technology. These are the actual technicians, those who do the very specific and technical tasks of keeping hardware and software continuing to run. I do not want to kind of confuse these with the technology resource teachers that are counted in the instructional category. So these are actually the nuts and bolts of having a network and basically continuing to keep that service open. Total technology of $646,000. And at the bottom of page 7, we have really an expenditure summary of all of those categories, totaling of $29,630,000. And on page 8, this is just a overall summary for both revenue and expenditures for major categories, and noting that we have a balanced budget of just over $29.6 million for FY22. Mr. Chairman, I'd be more than happy to go back over any part of the presentation, any figures or any questions that anyone may have, and then, of course, if there's any concerns or comments made during public comment for the public hearing, I'd be more than happy to come back up and help. So,
Any questions or concerns with Mr. Vickers?
all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. That brings us to public comment. Mr. Hicks, will you please read the guidelines for public comment?
A period of time for public comment will be designated on the meeting agenda during which the public may comment on issues related to public education. The Dixon County School Board believes that the citizens of the county should be heard and that it is an acceptable format for receiving public comment. After the public comment section of the meeting is closed, the public shall not be allowed to participate in the general board member discussions regarding agenda items. Public participation with the board members regarding agenda items can be disruptive, and the practice is prohibited by Robert's Rules of Order. It is the desire of the school board to treat each member of the public fairly and equally. Allowing one individual to participate while excluding others is unfair. The board may hold such public hearings as may be necessary to allow the public to more fully express their concerns, or the board may place the public comment section of any meeting at the end of the meeting to allow additional public comments. While we do not wish to restrict the free expression of opinion, we feel that certain restrictions may be necessary so that order and reasonable standards of decorum may be maintained. We ask the following standards be adhered to. The speaker will be recognized by the chair. Each speaker will be limited to 5 minutes. Speakers will refrain from the use of vulgarity or profanity and will avoid negative or embarrassing comments directed toward specific children or students. Board members should not respond to issues presented by speakers unless clarification is necessary. Matters of concern raised under public comment will be referred to the proper official for investigation and future board consideration if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Mr. Sitzer, will you please be our timekeeper? If any of the members of the public would like to call in and speak during public comment regarding the FY22 proposed budget, please call 835-1620.
Mr. Wallace, did you need to call someone?
Yeah, Cassie Music.
Okay. If you'll do that, please. And members of the board, what we may do next week, I'll wait until.
Hello?
Kathy,
Hey,
this is Ryan. I got you on with the board right now for public comment.
okay. Was the budget the same, Ryan, as 5% raise for teachers?
Yes, Miss Music, it is.
Oh, hello. Good evening, Mrs. Robinson, members of the board. My name is Kathy Music. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you tonight, but a big shout out to Ryan for being willing to call me back. I believe that staff goes above and beyond, but I just wanted to take time to thank everybody for their dedication to the teachers and for recognizing the hard work that not just teachers, but all school employees, from the superintendent down all the way from custodians, everyone. And so I assume you said that the 5% was in the budget as it was presented last time, and so I think that will really do a lot to help everyone, and I appreciate all the hard work from Mr. Vickers and from everybody in getting that going. And I guess I should thank the state legislation too. But anyway, since I couldn't be there, I just wanted to thank everybody, and that's it.
Thank you, Miss Music. Thank you, Miss Music.
Yes, you all have a good afternoon.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comment? Again, the phone number for the public to speak is 835-1620.
And while we're waiting, I will check with our school board attorney, but it may be that we can add a section to next week's meeting, just where the public can come in and comment about the budget, since we're a little bit, they certainly could have come, but we certainly want to try to provide that access to them. Mr. Vickers and Ms. Staler will be here with us next week, so we'll just allow that specifically just for the public. Any other calls?
Any more public comment on the budget? Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Aye.
Any opposed?